Beyoncé is done hiding. Federal investigators are circling the Carters in 2026, and R. Kelly, locked in solitary, allegedly fighting for his life, is threatening to expose everyone. We're talking Jay-Z, Diddy, the parties, the cover-ups, Aaliyah's ghost haunting every single one of them. And Beyoncé? She's standing in the middle of hip-hop's darkest hour, forced to choose between her throne and the truth. This whole situation has the internet absolutely spiraling because the queen might finally have to answer the one question she's avoided for decades. What did you know? Everybody thought they knew the full story about R. Kelly's downfall. Convicted predator, locked away, justice served, case closed. That was the version everyone repeated, the narrative the industry wanted you to believe. R. Kelly's era was over, and hip-hop could move on, clean its hands, and pretend the darkness never existed. But now, new legal filings, prison collapse, alleged assassination plots, federal whispers about Jay-Z, and Beyoncé reportedly being questioned as a witness. The whole narrative is twisting into something way bigger, way darker, and way more dangerous than anyone imagined. Because what if R. Kelly's downfall wasn't the end of the story? What if it was just the beginning of the biggest cover-up collapse in music history? Let me break this down, because the evidence coming out is street mind-blowing. The prison collapse. In 2026, R. Kelly's legal team files explosive new motions, claiming his life is in active danger. We're not talking about regular prison violence. We're talking coordinated, calculated, allegedly systematic attempts to silence him permanently. According to the filings, Kelly collapsed in his cell, rushed to the hospital. His lawyers are saying this wasn't a health crisis, it was an intentional overdose. They're claiming corrupt prison officials working with white supremacist gang members orchestrated the whole thing. And the reason? Kelly allegedly holds blackmail-level secrets, names, recordings, messages, proof of who knew what, who attended which parties, and who helped bury which scandals for decades. His team is framing his solitary confinement not as protection, but as containment. They're saying the system is trying to lock him away before he can start naming names. Think about it. The second R. Kelly opens his mouth and starts pointing fingers at the real power players, careers collapse, legacies burn, billion-dollar brands go up in flames. The Diddy connection. Now here's where things get even crazier. Diddy falls in 2024, convicted on transport-related charges, sentenced to 50 months. The freak-off parties get exposed. Cassie's testimony shattered the old code of silence. The untouchable mogul becomes a cautionary tale overnight. But the timing? People online are calling it too convenient to ignore. R. Kelly's legal team starts filing motions hinting at industry-wide conspiracies, and almost immediately after, Diddy's world combusts. Fans online turned into full-blown investigators, and they're connecting dots that look less like coincidence and more like a calculated takedown sequence. The theory spreading like wildfire? Diddy's conviction was a strategic sacrifice, a public offering to distract the masses from even bigger names allegedly floating through the same circles. Because once you start pulling at Diddy's thread, you find Jay-Z. And once you find Jay-Z, you find Beyoncé. The Aaliyah thread. And listen to this. Every single time you try to escape this story, one name drags you back. Aaliyah. Married to R. Kelly at 15, allegedly with a fake ID. Speculation swirls that Diddy was the one who first introduced Aaliyah to Kelly, setting off a chain reaction that would infect the entire industry. Jay-Z continued working with Kelly even after Aaliyah's tragic death in 2001, while insiders whispered her name had become a ghost haunting studio sessions, tours, and backroom deals. Fans online are slowing down old footage, zooming in on award show moments, comparing body language, analyzing who stood next to who and when. They're studying interviews from the early 2000s, looking for slip-ups, nervous laughter, avoidance tactics. And folks online swear the discomfort is written all over their faces. Aaliyah isn't just a tragic chapter. She's the cursed thread binding R. Kelly, Diddy, and Jay-Z in a timeline that looks less like random misfortune and more like a slow-motion collapse of an entire generation of untouchable men. 2021, R. Kelly convicted. 2024, Diddy indicated and later convicted. 2026, Kelly screams assassination plot, and Jay-Z's name starts slipping into federal whispers. The pattern doesn't look random anymore. It looks like karma finally showed up to collect. Now let's talk about Jay-Z, because his name won't stop surfacing in dark federal back channels if you believe the whispers. On the surface, billionaire, businessman, hip-hop elder statesman, untouchable. Beneath the surface in 2026, speculation is running wild. Allegations and theories swirling around him include claims that he helped fund the surviving R. Kelly documentary, not purely for justice, but as part of a long-term chess move to destroy a rival and scrub his own image clean. Remember the Best of Both Worlds tour? The pepper spray chaos at Madison Square Garden? The tour collapse that insiders now retell as the moment the empire turned on Kelly and started rewriting history. Damon Dash allegedly refused to engage unless profits went to the Aaliyah Foundation. Why? What guilt was he trying to wash off? In this narrative, Jay-Z stops looking like a bystander. He starts appearing as a strategist in a decades-long protect-yourself-at-all-costs operation, surfacing every single time the story gets darker. And now, in 2026, as R. Kelly threatens to expose everyone to save his own life, Jay-Z's name is floating through sealed rooms and federal murmurs more than ever. Now let's get into the motive, because this is where everything starts clicking into place. R. Kelly's desperation. R. Kelly isn't just fighting legal battles, he's allegedly fighting for his life. From inside a prison cell, he's watching his legacy get destroyed, his freedom evaporate, and his body break. His lawyers are saying he's being isolated, targeted, and systematically silenced. And why? Because he holds receipts. Think about it. R. Kelly was at the center of the industry for decades. He worked with everyone. He attended the parties, he saw the power dynamics, he knows who was in the room when things went down. And according to his team, he's been quietly holding on to evidence. Recordings, messages, logs, proof of who knew what and when. Now that he's staring down the rest of his life in prison, potentially facing death threats from inside, what does he have left to lose? Nothing. Which makes him the most dangerous man in the industry right now. Because if he decides to start naming names to save himself, the entire house of cards collapses. Jay-Z's calculated moves. Meanwhile, Jay-Z's been playing a different game, a long game, a strategic game. Back in the early 2000s, Jay-Z and R. Kelly were collaborators. Best of both worlds, sold-out tours, chart-topping hits. But behind the scenes, tensions were allegedly brewing. Aaliyah's death, the rumors, the whispers about Kelly's behavior that everyone in the industry knew, but nobody spoke about publicly. Fast forward to the 2010s, Jay-Z's empire is expanding. Roc Nation, Tidal, billion-dollar deals, and suddenly he's positioning himself as a businessman, a philanthropist, a voice for social justice. But how do you build that image when your past is tangled up with someone like R. Kelly? You cut the thread. Speculation suggests Jay-Z helped fund surviving R. Kelly, not purely out of morality, but as a preemptive strike. Remove Kelly from the board before Kelly can drag you into the fire. Rewrite the narrative. Position yourself as someone who supported the victims, not someone who enabled the predator. It's a power move, a survival move. And if you look at the timeline, it worked. R. Kelly got convicted, Jay-Z's image stayed intact, the public moved on. But now, in 2026, Kelly's threatening to flip the script. And if he starts talking about who really knew what, Jay-Z's carefully constructed narrative could shatter overnight. Diddy's fall as a warning. And then there's Diddy. Diddy's conviction in 2024 sent shockwaves through the industry. The man who built Bad Boy Records, the mogul who defined an era, brought down by Cassie's testimony and allegations of the infamous freak-off parties. But here's the part that really hits different. The timing of Diddy's conviction almost perfectly overlaps with Kelly's legal maneuvers. Kelly starts hinting at industry-wide secrets, and suddenly Diddy becomes the face of the industry's dark side, the sacrificial villain, the one everyone can point to and say, "See, we got the bad guy." But insiders are whispering, what if Diddy's conviction was allowed to happen? What if it was accelerated to create a distraction, hoping public outrage would stop before it reached the higher, more protected tiers of power? Because once you start investigating Diddy's circles, you find Jay-Z. And once you find Jay-Z, you find Beyoncé. And once you find Beyoncé, the entire myth of hip-hop royalty starts crumbling. Beyoncé's impossible position. And that brings us to Beyoncé. For years, she's been the untouchable queen, the symbol of empowerment, the woman who turned pain into power with Lemonade, the artist who preached liberation, survival, and strength. But now in 2026, she's reportedly being questioned by federal investigators, not as a suspect, but as a witness, someone who was allegedly in the room, someone who saw the parties, the power dynamics, the uncomfortable situations that now look less like industry quirks and more like criminal patterns. And here's the impossible choice she's facing. Stand by Jay-Z, defend him, refuse to cooperate, risk her entire legacy recast as a carefully packaged lie built on other women's suffering. Or break the code of silence, speak out, cooperate if subpoenaed, potentially destroy her marriage, fracture her empire, and expose a past she spent decades burying. Either way, her crown is no longer secure. It's hanging by a thread over a pit of secrets, and the world is watching to see which door she chooses. But here's the part that really hits different. This isn't just about moguls and power plays and federal investigations. This is about the women who got caught in the middle, the women who were too young, too powerless, too afraid to speak up. The women whose trauma got buried under NDAs, hush money, and industry pressure. Aaliyah's legacy. Aaliyah was 15 when she allegedly married R. Kelly. 15, a child. And the industry knew, they had to have known, because you don't orchestrate a secret marriage with fake documents without people noticing, without people helping, without people choosing to look the other way. And yet, for years, Aaliyah's name was barely mentioned. Her marriage to Kelly was treated like an uncomfortable footnote, a mistake, a rumor, something the industry decided to forget because it was easier to confront the truth. But Aaliyah's death in 2001 didn't erase what happened to her. It just made it harder to ignore. And now in 2026, her name is resurfacing in every conversation about accountability, justice, and the industry's darkest secrets. Because Aaliyah represents every young woman who got chewed up and spit out by a system that valued profit over protection. And every time someone like Beyoncé stays silent, it feels like another betrayal of Aaliyah's memory. The women who survived. And then there are the women who survived, the ones who saw the same things Aaliyah saw, but somehow made it out alive. The ones who learned to navigate the power dynamics, to smile at the right moments, to stay quiet when it mattered. Beyoncé was one of them. She came up in the same era as Aaliyah, young, beautiful, marketable, surrounded by older men with power, influence, and control. And according to insiders, she was present at industry events where inappropriate behavior allegedly went down, not as a participant, but as a terrified observer, advised to shut up and protect the brand. Survival in that era meant silence. Silence meant opportunity, and opportunity meant empire. But in 2026, that silence is starting to look less like survival and more like complicity. Because how can the woman who made lemonade, who preached about women supporting women, who built an entire brand around empowerment, stay dead silent while victims speak out? How can she sleep in the same bed as a man whose name won't stop circling federal conversations and not say a single word? The paradox is brutal. Either she knew and stayed quiet, or she didn't know, which makes her look dangerously protected and willfully blind. To the public, both options are unforgivable. And that's exactly why the hashtag Beyoncé knew started trending. For the first time in her career, Beyoncé's feminist brand is being dragged through the mud. Fans who once worshipped her are now questioning everything. Was lemonade real, or was it just branding? Was Renaissance liberation, or was it a distraction? Was she ever truly standing with survivors, or was she just standing with whoever kept her empire intact? The questions are vicious, the accusations are relentless, and Beyoncé's silence is only making it worse. Because every day she doesn't speak, the narrative gets darker. Every day she doesn't address the rumors, the speculation grows more. And every day she stays by Jay-Z while his name floats through federal whispers, her legacy crumbles a little more. For years, the Carters had a foolproof defense strategy: distraction through dominance. Every time controversy surfaced, they dropped an album. Every time rumors started swirling, they announced a tour. Every time the internet started asking uncomfortable questions, they released a surprise visual that broke the internet and shifted the conversation. It worked flawlessly. Lemonade distracted from infidelity rumors. 444 reframed Jay-Z as a reformed man. The on-the-run tours kept fans focused on the spectacle, not the shadows. And Renaissance? That was Beyoncé's victory lap, a global celebration of her dominance that coincided perfectly with the industry's darkest implosions. But now, in 2026, the distraction machine is breaking down. The legal firewall. Reports started surfacing in late 2025 that Beyoncé's team hired additional legal counsel. Not PR, not crisis management, legal counsel. The kind you hire when you're preparing for subpoenas, testimony, and federal scrutiny. Fans noticed, commentators noticed, and insiders started whispering. This isn't about protecting the brand anymore, this is about survival strategy. Because if federal investigators are circling the Carters, if R. Kelly is threatening to name names, if Diddy's conviction opened the floodgates, then Beyoncé isn't just a celebrity anymore. She's a potential key witness to a generation of abuse and cover-ups. And key witnesses need lawyers. Good lawyers, expensive lawyers, the kind who know how to navigate federal investigations without destroying your empire in the process. The asset moves. But it gets even crazier. Rumors emerged in early 2026 that Beyoncé has started moving assets into separate accounts, real estate holdings, business investments, financial structures that would allow her to protect her wealth if things go south. To fans, it looks like smart business. To insiders, it looks like a woman preparing for scorched earth. A woman who knows that if Jay-Z goes down, she can't go down with him. A woman who's building an escape hatch while the ship is still floating. And that's when the speculation really exploded. Is Beyoncé preparing to leave Jay-Z? Is she setting up a strategic separation plan in case he's formally targeted? Is she quietly distancing herself from his past while publicly maintaining the image of a united front? Nobody knows for sure, but the moves she's allegedly making look less like loyalty and more like calculated self-preservation. And then there's Solange. Let's rewind to 2014, the elevator incident at the Met Gala. Everyone turned it into memes, jokes, Solange wildin'. Beyoncé stayed calm, Jay-Z took the hits, the Carters released a statement about moving forward as a family. But in 2026, a new theory is spreading like wildfire. What if Solange wasn't just reacting to an infidelity? What if she was confronting Jay-Z about far darker industry dealings? What if she was trying to shield Beyoncé from things she already knew, and things Beyoncé didn't want to face? Because since around 2023, Solange has almost completely disappeared from public life. No major projects, no high-profile appearances, radio silence. And people online are connecting that disappearance to the industry implosions happening all around her. The elevator moment is no longer seen as a family squabble. It's being reinterpreted as the only honest moment the public ever saw. A glitch in the matrix, a crack in the carefully constructed Carter image that hinted at the chaos boiling underneath. And if Solange knew something back in 2014, what does Beyoncé know now? The Renaissance Tour timing. Let's talk about timing, because the Renaissance Tour ran from 2022 to 2024. Massive, global, record-breaking. A celebration of Beyoncé's dominance and artistry. But those tour dates, they overlapped almost perfectly with the rising investigations into Diddy, with the R. Kelly legal maneuvers, with the industry's reckoning bubbling beneath the surface. Coincidence? Maybe, but fans online are starting to ask, was the Renaissance Tour a genuine artistic statement or a strategic distraction? A way to keep the public focused on Beyoncé the performer, not Beyoncé the witness. A way to flood the media with celebration instead of investigation. Because every time a scandal threatened to surface, Beyoncé dropped another surprise appearance, another viral moment, another headline that shifted the conversation. And now that the tour is over, now that the distractions have stopped, the questions are finally catching up to her. Now, this whole situation gets even crazier when you realize how deep the connections run. Because this isn't just about R. Kelly, Diddy, and Jay-Z. This is about an entire ecosystem of power, protection, and silence that defined an era. The industry machine. Let's keep it real. The music industry in the 90s and 2000s operated on a code of silence that was basically ironclad. You didn't speak out, you didn't expose, you didn't betray. Because the second you broke that code, your career was over. And that code protected everyone at the top. Producers, executives, moguls, artists. It didn't matter if they were predators, abusers, or criminals. As long as they were profitable, the machine protected them. R. Kelly was profitable for decades, so the machine protected him. Diddy was profitable for decades, so the machine protected him. And Jay-Z, he built his own machine so nobody could touch him. But machines break down. And right now, in 2026, the industry machine is collapsing under the weight of its own corruption. The documentary strategy. Meanwhile, fans online been working like full-blown investigators, digging into the timing of industry documentaries and exposés. Surviving R. Kelly dropped in 2019, Framing Britney Spears in 2021, the Diddy allegations exploded in 2023-2024. And people are noticing a pattern. Every time a major scandal surfaces, it's framed as an isolated incident, one bad apple, one tragic story, but never the full system, never the names at the very top, never the people who enabled, funded, and profited from the abuse. The theory spreading online, documentaries are being used as controlled demolitions, release just enough information to satisfy public outrage without exposing the full network, sacrifice one predator to protect 10 others. And Jay-Z's alleged involvement in funding surviving R. Kelly, that's starting to look less like justice and more like damage control. The silent sisterhood. Behind closed doors, female artists from that era are said to be terrified of destroying their careers, terrified of destroying legends their entire identities were built around, terrified of admitting what they saw and survived. Because speaking out means losing everything. It means being blacklisted, it means being labeled difficult, unstable, attention-seeking. It means watching your empire crumble while the men you exposed walk away unscathed. And Beyoncé's name sits at the top of that list, a symbol of what happens when empowerment branding collides with buried trauma. A reminder that even queens have secrets. And the longer she stays silent, the more the internet turns on her. And here's what's different in 2026. The younger generation isn't buying the silence anymore. Gen Z and younger millennials grew up watching My Too. They grew up seeing Harvey Weinstein, Bill Cosby, R. Kelly, and others finally face consequences. They grew up believing accountability matters, that trauma matters, that silence is complicity. And now they're looking at Beyoncé, their icon, their queen, and asking, why isn't she speaking? Why isn't she standing with survivors? Why is she protecting an empire built on other women's pain? The generational divide is brutal. Older fans still defend Beyoncé, arguing she doesn't owe anyone an explanation. Younger fans are calling her a hypocrite, arguing her silence invalidates everything she's ever said about empowerment. And the internet is watching that divide grow wider every single day. What we're seeing here is way bigger than just one celebrity scandal. This is the final collapse of an entire era's illusion. The empire versus the truth. The bigger conversation is about what happens when empowerment becomes a brand instead of a reality, when liberation becomes a marketing strategy, when survivors are used as props instead of being genuinely heard. Beyoncé built an empire on the idea that Black women can rise above trauma, reclaim power, and dominate. And that message resonated. It inspired millions. It changed culture. But if that message was built on a foundation of silence about the very systems that created the trauma in the first place, then what does the empire actually stand for? That's the question the internet is asking, and Beyoncé doesn't have an answer yet. The responsibility of icons. When you constantly position yourself as a voice for the voiceless, as a symbol of justice and empowerment, you're not just building a brand, you're creating a responsibility. And that responsibility means speaking up when it's uncomfortable. It means standing with survivors, even when they're accusing people in your circle. It means choosing truth over protection. Beyoncé's silence in 2026 feels like a betrayal of that responsibility. It feels like she built an empire on the backs of survivors' stories and then abandoned them the second it threatened her own throne. And the internet isn't forgiving that. The warning. Beyoncé's situation is a wild example, but it's also a warning for anybody with power, influence, and a carefully constructed public image. The more you build your brand on moral authority, the more you claim to stand for justice, the harder you fall when your own complicity gets exposed. Because in 2026, silence isn't protection anymore, it's evidence. And the public is done giving icons a pass just because they are famous, talented, or beloved. The reckoning has arrived, and nobody is untouchable. So where does this leave us? R. Kelly allegedly has receipts, secret recordings, messages, logs, names, and he's facing down the rest of his life in prison with nothing left to lose. Diddy is already convicted, locked away, his empire in ruins. Jay-Z's name keeps floating through sealed rooms and federal whispers, allegedly connected to decades of industry secrets. And Beyoncé stands in the middle of a burning empire with only two doors. Door 1, loyalty. She stands by Jay-Z, defends him publicly, refuses to cooperate with investigators, maintains the image of a united front. But if she chooses that door, her legacy gets rewritten. She becomes the woman who chose empire over truth, the woman who built a brand on empowerment and then stayed silent while survivors begged her to speak. Her crown becomes a symbol of complicity. Door 2, truth. She breaks the code of silence, cooperates with federal investigators if subpoenaed, speaks out about what she saw, what she knew, when she knew it. But if she chooses that door, her marriage shatters, her empire fractures, her past gets exposed, and the myth of Beyoncé, the untouchable queen, dies. Her crown becomes a symbol of survival at any cost. The impossible choice. Either way, she loses. Either way, her legacy gets rewritten. Either way, the public will judge her. Because in 2026, the internet isn't asking for perfection, it's asking for honesty. And Beyoncé's silence feels like the one thing she can't afford to give. Nothing. If R. Kelly starts naming names to save his life, Beyoncé won't be able to hide behind surprise album drops and world tours. She'll be forced to stand in the harshest spotlight of her career, with no choreography, no lighting, no control. And everyone will be watching to see whether she finally stands with the survivors or chooses the industry's oldest, deadliest tradition: silence. Stay locked in, because this story is about to get even crazier. More details dropping, more clues surfacing. Reports say R. Kelly's legal team is preparing new filings that could name specific industry figures. Federal investigators are allegedly expanding their scope beyond Diddy into other major players. And Beyoncé's legal moves suggest she knows something big is coming. So drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Beyoncé knew what was going on behind the scenes? Do you think she'll finally break her silence? Or will she protect Jay-Z no matter the cost? And honestly, can her legacy survive this? Or is the crown already cracked beyond repair? Make sure you like the video if this opened your eyes to how deep this scandal really goes. Hit subscribe so you don't miss a single update, because we're covering every twist, every federal leak, every move the Carters make as this story unfolds. And turn on notifications so you're the first to know when new evidence drops. I appreciate you for rocking with me through this deep dive. This is the kind of story that changes how we see icons, legacies, and the industry itself. I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe out there, and remember, in hip-hop's darkest hour, silence isn't loyalty. It's evidence.